Welcome to, we're now called Occupy CCTV, and we have a friend of mine that I've known for many years, Linda Jenkins, and we look forward to talking with you because you've been very involved with Occupy Boston.
Yes, I have been. Yes, since October, the evening of October 6th, I guess, is when I very first learned about it and went online and read everything that I could about it and sent them an email asking what they needed for what they could use, what kind of help they could use, and got an email back saying, listing a number of things, and the top on the list was facilitation. So the next day I went to a facilitation team meeting and helped to facilitate the General Assembly that I had attended there on October 7th, that was.
And what was that like? I mean, what did they teach you for facilitation?
Well, it was very interesting. I've done facilitation of different types, but at that facilitation team meeting, they had a 5-page description of the consensus process that is used there. And so we were kind of oriented to that process and the roles of the various facilitation team members at that time, and talked about how the process works. So it's a pretty detailed process that has been working. We've been using, I think, since the beginning, although it's a living process that gets revised as we use it and discover that it needs to be changed.
So this is a beautiful way when you ask yourself what you can do for Occupy or for other things, you just write a letter and say, what did you say? What did you need?
Yeah, I said, what can I do? Where should I show up? What do you need? What, when, where?
Having trouble with relationships? Send an email. Dear love, what do you need and what can I do? Who could ask for more? Wow, we now have solved. We've been working on 10 years how to get along with one another. We finally have the tool.
Yeah.
So how is facilitation changed?
Well, so there's a process. There are 2 facilitators that conduct the General Assemblies, and it's a democratic process where everybody can speak. And one way it's changed is that there used to be process monitors in the audience, and if someone had a question or a point of information, they would have to run it by one of these process monitors just to make sure that it was a point of information or a question that would be appropriate at that time. And since this has evolved, now kind of what we do is we take a few minutes to process in the audience, and then we ask our neighbors, I have this question or I have this point of information. Does that sound like a real point of information or a question to you?
Well, this is very beautiful. Right?
Yes,
that
it
also
is.
could work. Yes.
Yeah, and
we
then
have neighbors who have trouble with Michelle. You really think this is a good idea to bring up now? We're very good. We've changed the world already. We've just heard the beginning tip of this. So what was it like facilitating?
Well, it's interesting, point of information versus a question, too, that, to think about that.
Yes.
Offering something you think could be helpful.
Yep. It's really to slow
having a
down the
question.
process. So there'll be a proposal brought, and then there's a time for clarifying questions on the proposal, and then points of information about the proposal, and then statements of concern or objections, and then statements of support, and then amendments that could be offered, and then the person or the working group that's bringing the proposal has the opportunity to reflect on the amendment that might be being suggested and either accept it or not accept it, and then bring it back to the body. So there's a step-by-step process that really allows for the most important material to come forward and kind of screens out the personal opinions that are really coming from people's individual baggage. So
Yes.
it's because when you have several hundred people in the audience or participating, you don't have all night to process these proposals, and it works. So
Amazing. Just to go down and they're still happening daily? Is it daily?
no, they're happening 4 times a week now. They're on Saturday and Sunday, and Tuesdays and Thursdays.
What time?
On the weekends they're at 5, and on the weekdays they're at 6.
So it's dark now.
Yes,
right?
it's dark now. Yeah, and the facilitation team meets an hour before, and it meets now in South Station. We were meeting in the Federal Building Plaza. But everyone is welcome. We try to have different facilitators at every
Wow.
General
So
Assembly.
we could go down and be facilitators?
Absolutely.
Really?
And we try to have some demographic diversity. So we really prefer to have a man and a woman co-facilitate.
We qualify.
Yes, you would. And
Do they check, or they just take you at as you appear?
as you appear,
Yes.
or female identifying, or
Oh, yeah, yes.
male identifying. So
Yes.
you don't
Good. Yes.
And how long do they often last?
They
They
start
do
at
it
6 or 7, and they usually last about 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours. Yeah,
Wow.
so they're long. They're pretty
Wow.
long. Yeah.
And people stay?
Yes. Well, now that it's getting cold, we sometimes, in the very coldest weather, we do lose quorum sometimes. But we are.
And what does a quorum mean?
Well, a quorum is a very subjective,
Yep.
and it's determined by the people who are present. The facilitators will say, well, I'm wondering if we have a quorum. Will you look around, and if you think we have a quorum, show us
Yes.
your twinkle fingers.
We should do that too. That would be so nice. You're
Yes,
having a discussion
yes.
with someone
If you like it,
your friend, you're talking to your friend.
right? Or if you don't like it.
Yeah, how you doing? And you're coming
Right.
across too strong. And
Right,
you say,
you
no,
know,
do good, do good.
this isn't so
Oh,
good.
how you doing? Oh, yeah,
Yeah, or I don't really care one way or the
Oh,
other.
we should have new signs, Michelle.
Yeah,
couples
new
have signs. We
signs,
have new
yeah.
signs.
That's right, that's
Well,
right.
I don't really care. Which is okay. You can still.
Yeah, lukewarm.
Yes, and what's the ecstasy? Is like a huge, or is this the highest?
That's
you can
that's the highest.
Oh, that's the highest.
Or maybe jumping up and down.
go? Oh, this has changed the world alone. Now, where did this come from?
The occupation movement was inspired by the Arab Spring, by the people in different countries in the Arab world overthrowing their tyranny governments. And then last, I think July or August, Adbusters up in Canada issued a call to the peoples of the North to similarly rise up against the institutions that are oppressing us. And so Occupy Wall Street was the first one to really mobilize, and then the others have followed suit and are continuing to follow suit. On Black Friday after Thanksgiving, I was up in northern New Hampshire, which is my home, and I happened to pick up the paper, and there was a little local occupation movement that was meeting that morning at Schuler Park in the middle of North Conway. So I drove up, and they were there. They had made little signs off, just printed them off the internet saying "Occupy Black Friday, shop local."
Yeah, oh my!
And,
that's such a nice idea.
Yeah, and then one's on the back that said "Support small businesses."
Yes. Oh, so it's very challenging to get to you, and you need genius really to know how to use nonviolence to get what we would like.
Yes,
That's
yes.
very, very hard. Gandhi's brilliant. Someone said that we need something like a salt march.
Yes.
I was just reading this wonderful Leila Veld, which I was talked about last week, and when the British said you can't take salt
Right.
from the ocean, you've got to buy it at Stop and Shop.
Right.
I'm translating this for the Cambridge audience.
21st century.
Yes. And so that was when they pass dumb laws like that. Then it's simple, but it seems simple, but you have to figure it out. Simple stroke of genius. I'm going to walk 200 miles, and anyone can join me, and we are going to take salt from the sea. And by the time they were there was press and military, and they were beaten, I believe. But Gandhi went and did it, went to jail for it.
Yeah.
But it was but it's hard to stop. If too many people start doing this, it's hard to stop it, like with Bank of America.
Yes.
So that would be wonderful. What are creative ideas to really stop the fact that corporations are people, among other things. Medicare for all.
Right.
Michelle was on at Brookline
Corner.
Coolidge Corner, advocating that. But how can we do that? Is do you have any? Well, fortunately, we have Linda here, who's a lawyer, and she's going to tell all of the occupiers in the country what our next Gandhian step will be.
Well, that's quite a setup, I have to say. And I guess what I really, I want to speak about Occupy Boston. I mean, I think in listening to you talk about Gandhi's march, for salt, and it came to me about our little occupation on Dewey Square in the Rose Kennedy Greenway. I was lucky enough to sit in on the last half of the hearing of the restraining order hearing of Occupy Boston against the city of Boston and the police and the Greenway, and it was very interesting to hear that the Greenway is public space legislated to be for free speech.
My Lord!
Yes,
Wow.
and so and we are of course occupying a small percentage of the whole Greenway, which is huge. Extends, I don't know if it's a mile, but it extends quite a long way, parallel to the harbor. And our little community there is against the law. We have gotten no permits, and we haven't gotten permission of the park to be there. But we are a living expression of what we're aspiring to. We're trying to build a community that is very different from the dominant culture in which we're embedded. And so the argument is, and I think the reality is, that just being there in community is an expression of speech, of communication, of our hopes and values and desires, and it's very patriotic. I think it goes to the fundamental values of what it is to be American, to help your neighbor, to be independent, to be honest and enterprising and creative, and I would say nonviolent.
And you were there, yes?
Yeah, I've been there since. I have not stayed overnight there, but I was arrested there on October 11th, and I happened to be there. I'm there about 5 days a week. I happened to be there for the Great Boston Sink Skirmish just the other night, and it's it's like any community or any group of people. We have our ups and downs. And there are personalities, and there's some people who do more work and other people that do less work, and so there's those kinds of problems, but we're struggling to stay present to each other and work those out.
Well, that's beautiful, stay present. So, even though this is Cambridge, there might be one viewer possibly who is distracted by the Patriots that doesn't know about the Great Sink Skirmish. So maybe you can share that with us.
So that was Thursday. Thursday morning we had the hearing about the preliminary injunction, and the judge said that she would issue her decision within 15 days and that the restraining order stays in effect until her judgment is issued. And so that evening, one of the lawyers who represented us came to report to the community about what happened in the hearing, because it was a very small courtroom and not nearly everybody could fit in there. I was lucky enough to get in for the last half of it. As he was telling us how the hearing went, a new kitchen sink arrived right at the scene of where the General Assembly was taking place. And we heard during the hearing that there are a lot of concerns about health and sanitation and safety, that seems to be the city's primary source of concern. We've tried our best and continue to try to meet those concerns. We want it to be a safe and clean community. We've had a 3-step washing station for dishes for our food tent, and we've been hauling the water in and hauling the gray water out. And we had a special sink that was built for us, a stainless steel industrial size sink that was brought in Thursday evening, and it was brought into the park, and then just after it got into the park, the police stopped it and the GA sort of gradually drifted over and surrounded the sink.
GA meaning General
The
Assembly.
General Assembly,
Yeah.
right, just drifted over and surrounded the sink and the 4 policemen who were standing there and asked them, why won't you let it in? And they couldn't give us an answer. They didn't know why. They were just checking with their superiors, and we never did get an explanation about why it wasn't allowed in. We were just trying to comply with what some of the concerns that had been vocalized were. So it gradually grew. More and more people came, and we surrounded the sink, and a number of people were chanting. Our lawyer was still there, standing kind of up where the facilitators.
And what were they chanting? Do you remember?
Oh, they were chanting things like, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was there or a little bit later, but whose sink, our sink.
Wow.
And also just, this is a peaceful demonstration, this is a peaceful protest, and
Because there was a teach-in earlier that day about nonviolence.
yes, there had been a 1 hour training on nonviolent civil disobedience before the GA. So we were kind of ripe for an action, if you will, and so there wasn't time clearly to discuss and decide, but we just automatically linked arms. I mean, I was right in the front by the sink, and then someone did use the people's mic and called out to ask us not to, don't intimidate the police, and then everybody take one step back. So we all took one step back, and the police used a lot of restraint, and we used a lot of restraint. Then someone said,
Feels like a dance in some ways.
well, yeah, it was loud. I mean, I was just kind of watching, but then we all sat down
Yes.
and linked with our arms still linked very closely, bunched together. And then the police just basically lifted the sink above us and then plowed
And
through.
this was heavy, right?
It was very heavy, yeah. It took 4 or 5 of them
Yep.
to lift with the pipes on it and everything. To lift it over our heads and then just plowed through the crowd. I know that at least one woman was injured and had to be taken to the hospital, I think.
Just probably stepped on by the...
Yes, stepped on. And there was one fellow behind me who kind of lunged forward, and I thought he was lunging at the police. I think he may have been lunging at the sink, but in the moment, a couple of us grabbed him
Yes.
from the back and pulled him back, and he sort of fell to the side of me, and then I could see policemen coming towards him, kind of for him, so then I just kind of put my body over his, and then they just went on.
Wow. Oh my, I hope you're visually feeling this. If you want Linda to put her body over you, come to Occupy Boston, and you never know. You never know. We're with her now. We've lucked out.
Well, it didn't end. That wasn't the end. I mean,
Yes.
they put the sink in the end of the truck. It didn't fit in the whole way, but then they put the sirens on and they tried to drive the truck down the street, but a number of protesters got in front of the truck.
Wow.
And so the truck was going very slowly, and then it just came to a standstill, and then there were police that lined up in front of the truck facing forward, and then there was a row, actually several rows of protesters facing the police, and it was kind of a standoff there. And they stayed there for about 15 or 20 minutes. There were also protesters on the sidewalk, so there was kind of a division among the protesters about what our strategy should be. I was kind of floating back and forth between the two. And then eventually the protesters just realized that this was kind of a standoff, and they dispersed, and the truck left, and then the police lined up across the road and made a sweep walking back towards the camp because they had left their motorcycles and their cars back there. So they made a sweep down up the street, making people go to the sidewalks, and then when they got up to their motorcycles, they basically hung around for another hour or so. I didn't really understand why. The GA resumed, and people were trying to process what had just happened. And then I went back over to see what was going on with the motorcycles and the cops and all of that. And just as I got there, apparently Eric Martin, who had been our witness at the hearing that day, had been videoing the cops with his phone, I think, and pushed down by an undercover cop and in between the motorcycles. And then the police went to grab him and were apparently going to arrest him when the crowd yelled, no, it wasn't him, it was the other guy, who pushed him. So they just kept Eric in the street for about 10 or 15 minutes, questioning him while this other fellow, who was in a hoodie with light-colored cargo pants, was just sort of chatting with the police. They weren't questioning him at all. So it was really starting to look like it had been a setup. And I went up and approached Eric and the cops and asked them what they were going to do. And one of the policemen said, nobody's going to be arrested. So we stood and watched, and eventually Eric was released, and he had injured his hip and went back to the medic tent to get that checked out. And then the guy, the figure in the hoodie, started walking away from the crowd, and I went and followed him and caught up with him, and I just said, who are you working for? And he just tried to put me aside and said, good night, go stand on the sidewalk. And I said, why did you push Eric down? And he said, I have a job to do. And so I said, well, are you going to push me down too? And then we were walking as this conversation took place, and we came up to another vehicle where there was a police vehicle with two officers in it, and they had their window down, and they asked the fellow, are you okay? Is everything okay? And he said, yeah, this woman just won't let me alone. So I just turned around and left. I had just wanted to confirm that he was
And it was true,
yeah,
clearly
that he was an
yes.
undercover cop. So it's just interesting. The whole experience was pretty interesting. I think we've got a lot to learn from that.
Such as, and we still have 4.5 minutes
Okay.
to teach us what we have to learn.
Well, I think for one thing, we were not, there's a lot of diversity in the occupation movement and certainly at Occupy Boston, and we struggle to be welcoming to that diversity. And that diversity could be seen in that incident. People were not united about how much they wanted to be engaged, who wanted to block the truck and who wanted to stay on the
Yes.
sidewalk, and there's room for all of that, but I think it would be helpful for us to process that and to come to more clarity in each one of us individually, and then perhaps in different segments of the community about what our values are in different kinds of situations, where our comfort level is, and what's productive and what's not productive, and how to behave in these
Very
situations.
hard, because these are just people that are just coming down. They're
Yes.
They're not. So what would you now, if in hindsight, what would you have preferred to have done?
I think I'm pretty happy with what I did. I think that it was really important to show that the sink was ours. We paid for it. In fact, one fellow I talked with later said that he had gone up to one of the police and said he wanted to report a stolen sink.
Yes.
And in fact, we're still
Trying to get that sink back?
Trying to
Yes,
get it
'cause
back, yes.
They have no right to that sink.
No, they don't. That's right. And no one could cite us a rule or a law that prohibited us bringing the sink in or having it there. So, I think that this is, our being at Dewey Square is like Gandhi's march.
Mm-hmm.
Our presence is what it's about, and it's providing us an arena where we can be together, and and we're combining our energies.
Oh, so that's an interesting analogy. So
Yeah.
it is like the march to the
Yes.
just by being there, because that's not
Yes.
because they're saying you shouldn't be. Although this city is being kinder than many cities.
Well, so far, we fully expected that before we got the injunction on November 17th, we expected that the Boston
And the injunction
police-
meant that the city could not ask Occupy Boston to leave
Right.
for at least a month, right?
Well, right. It was 2 weeks. It was
Oh,
from the 17th to the 30th,
Yes.
to the 1st. And it wasn't asked, it was the police would not come in and, and clear the space.
Yes. Till November 1st or December 1st?
December 1st.
Yes.
From November 17th to December
Yes.
1st. And now we have another reprieve as long as it takes the judge to write her decision. But we do feel that this is, the other occupations in other big cities that have been cleared are, I think they're still alive and they're still growing, but it is difficult without having that central space. But we're already, trying to make alternative plans for different scenarios.
Oh, and
Our intention is not that, we're not going to just be responsive and we're not just going to die away. Even if we do get cleared, we're going to pop up. It's going to keep popping up.
stay tuned.
Yes.
You will find out.
That's
We won't
right.
tell you now, but
We can't tell you now.
We're having you. Well, yes, we can't. But we will have Linda back to let us know. This is like a soap opera.
All right.
Yes.
A cliffhanger.
Yeah, cliffhanger. What are they going to come up with? Yes, we have a symbol. Anytime we're in our own kitchen washing
Yes.
out our glasses, we can be identifying
Yes.
with the confiscated kitchen
Yes.
sink.
Yes. Keep in mind the incarcerated sink.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, on that happy note, we have about 20 seconds to say goodbye. If there's
Okay.
any last thing you would like to say.
Well, I encourage everyone to come and visit the occupation. Don't believe what you read or what other people tell you. Come and see it for yourself. You'll be more welcome than you can imagine. And greet me if you see me there.
Oh my! Thank you so much. That
Thank
was
you.
wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
so
you.